2 minutes. One minute. Time.
Good evening. Welcome to the November meeting of the North Platte Public Schools Board of Education. The purpose of the North Platte Public School District is to prepare all students to be productive, responsible citizens in safe, caring, supportive learning environment. Our direction is to prepare every student for success through highly qualified educational programs delivered by highly effective educators who use innovative, research-based strategies in a safe, supportive environment in collaboration with family, businesses, and community members. Roll call, Sheila.
Blasey. Here. Mark Nicholson. Matthew Peterson.
Present.
Skip Baltic.
Present.
Joanne Lynn Green.
Present.
Ivan Mitchell.
Present.
The Nebraska's Opens Meeting Act legislates the methods by which public meetings are conducted. Information pertaining to this act is posted on the back wall of the boardroom. If you would, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Corey not gonna be here. We start with our presentations, and I think our first one are our Bulldogs of the Month, Dana Sorensen and Logan Streeter. I do not see Mr. Spatansky here. So why don't both of you come up and tell us a little about yourselves?
Hi, my name is Dana Sorensen, and I'm here with my mom, Carrie Sorensen. I have been involved in multiple extracurricular activities during my high school career. I am involved in theater, swim and dive, the musical, and also student council and National Honor Society. I am also a leader of a new program at NPPS called the Bulldog Ambassadors that is going. It is a tour guide system that has helped new transfer students on their first day of school. I'm also very involved in academics. I have a 4.0 and plan on maintaining my 4.0. If calculus has anything to say about it. I am currently unaware of where I would like to go after high school, but I'm 4-year university.
Oh. Okay, Logan.
I'm Logan Streeter. I'm here with my two parents, Doug and Lori Streeter, and my two nephews, Kyan and Tyshawn Schroeder. I've been in football, basketball, key club, and journalism. And right now I'm working on a documentary with Mr. Willie in advanced video production. And I have a 3.99 GPA thanks to college algebra. My favorite memory of high school so far was beating the #1 team in the state, Westside, 21-17. And my plans after I graduate, I plan to further my education at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and majoring in graphic design or sports communications.
Okay.
That's ridiculous. Nobody wants one of those.
What? Ooh. Nope, it came back. I got to remember to keep moving. Next up is the foundation report. Terry?
My email.
The local stars is returning for it, so. Foundation grows, sorry. Thanks. I think I'd learn. So we're very excited about that, and we're hoping to get a lot of past recipients to participate and maybe be on the stage prior to. So we'll be in touch. We're also gearing up for some year-end giving. We've got a letter going out to about 10,000 alumni and community members. Mid-Nebraska Community Foundation also does a year-end giving, which is great because that reduces our costs from online giving. So we always love to partner with Mid-Nebraska Community Foundation as well. Of course, you can choose to give online with nppsf.org as well. So without further ado, we've got some catching up to do. The foundation and the district always does a great job with partnering for our Bulldog Employees of the Month. And we had some catching up to do. We revamped it. We kind of did August and September, and starting in October, Dr. Rhodes had a great idea of the buildings already do a little bit of recognition. And so we raised those people up and go ahead and get them to that district level, and then we'll take them to that year-end level as well. So they'll all be going in for that. So as I call your name, if you can stand up. Once we get all 6 of you, we'll have you do a photo since there is a bunch of you. So, this is always so much fun, and we've got some photos to share that the district put out on the website. Thank you, Tina, to give them recognition. This wouldn't be possible without our business partners. The foundation did August, Hub International sponsored September, and then Grandal's Roofing and Roofing Company did this last month in October. So we're always very grateful for that. And Prairie Friends and Flowers comes along with us each and every month with a bouquet of flowers, or in one of our recipients' case, they got a bouquet of beef sticks. So I think he was pretty excited about that. So anyway, we're going to start off with our August. From McDonald, we had Adam Hotzen. And then from Buffalo Early Childhood Center, we had Myra Rodriguez, which was really fun because her significant other came along too, which was fun. And then in September, from Adams, Alice Boyer was recognized. I understand she's not able to make it this evening. And then from the high school, we had Tina Matthew. And let me tell you, she was exciting. We had a good time with her. In October, we also went to back to the high school for Colin Swedberg and to Madison for Sierra Andrews. Give them all a round of applause. Or we'd like to recognize you. Getting bored? She broke her. Congrats. Absolutely.
Height and ward.
Dr. Rose, would you like to jump in?
Oh, that's fine.
So us. Yeah, no problem.
I feel like she's. Yeah.
Can't find your email. Did you send it or did Sparks?
Sparks.
Oh, then I found it.
Thank you, Terry.
These don't pull up.
And then next we'll have each. November's will be there.
The two.
Yeah.
Am I Abe Lacey? Oh, I have that.
Next up is superintendent's report.
Thank you. Today we had a professional development day. We had our second round of Boys Town training at the high school. We had elementary staff this morning and high school this afternoon. And so that went really, really well. I know our presenters they had a lot of really positive things to say. Just for board information, with state conference this week, there'll be no weekly update that'll go out at the end of the week. December board meeting, we're going to have kind of a test run in the HDC.
Oh.
So Brian has worked on some microphones and I think these cameras will go over. So we're going to give it a test run for the December meeting. We'll kind of see how that goes. Reminder to the finance subcommittee that in December, that will be a little bit earlier meeting. We'll plan on meeting at 7:30 at Eisenhower Elementary. Just give ourselves a little bit more time. State conference is 16th, 17th, and 18th of this week. New board workshop is December 6th. I think some of us are going to get registered for that. And then I would just like to say, on behalf of our district office, we want to really wish our students and families and community, and of course our staff, just the happiest of Thanksgiving. So that's all I have.
Okay, board comments. First of all, I see Cindy O'Connor out there who will be joining us in January. Glad to see you here. I have other stuff too, but go ahead.
Okay. So just a little bit of a report on some of the activities I've done the last month. I was able to go to the end of the year dinner, I guess, for golf. They did a bulldog scramble. I did not participate in that. So you don't want to see me on a golf course. It would not be good. Went to the fall choir concert, saw actually pretty much all of the football games, including the district games. So, and I will agree that the West Side win was pretty neat. I also really thought it was neat that one of our players got the West Side football. So I thought that was a nice honor for him. And attended state marching band. I've been to 2 of the one act competitions, the Veterans Day Parade. I visited Washington Elementary, and I was invited to read to the kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade at Lincoln. Again, always a great time. If you ever get invited to do that, it's great. And then also was able to visit with Mr. Spatansky about some things with the high school. And I really appreciate that we were able to have the finance committee at Adams Middle School. Partially because, well, the last 2 times we've had finance committee meeting, we've been in different buildings, and the principals have been able to sit in the meetings. And so I think it's good for them to see us from a different perspective than on the board night, and kind of see us in action as we're discussing different things. And it's good to be in the buildings and to hear their perspective when they're able to share with us as well. So and the only other comment I guess I would have is I really have appreciated our social media presence on Instagram and Facebook. I've seen a lot of different posts from classrooms, and people are sharing out creative teaching methods. I've seen Dr. Rhodes visiting the schools, and there's just a lot that's going on there. So really appreciate all of that that's happening.
All right.
I got to go into Madison, Adams, and the high school and sit in 2 different classrooms. Kurt's was one of them, so that was exciting. But I was amazed especially at Adams, I sat in a resource class, and then in Kurt's 4th period, which is a very full class. And we had EL students, and the diversity is just amazing. And the teachers, after both of those classes, came up to me and they were like, "Oh, sorry, it was so crazy." And it did not look crazy at all. They seemed to have so much control of that classroom. It was amazing. And just another thing, I mean, the teachers we have are just phenomenal. So I was very encouraged.
I would echo Joanne's comments about the subcommittee meeting at Adams. We've done that now 2 months in a row, and plan again in December to go to Eisenhower. And that's something new we implemented just recently. And I think that's really neat, especially when we've, we had a big project at Adams, and now we're talking about another project at McDonald. And so it's good to see kind of firsthand the difference, especially at Adams project, how the building looks and the new lighting and air quality and everything. And so I appreciate that we've done that. And then, Angela, I know you have more personal experience than I do with this, but I've mentioned that my kids have started attending Ladybug Crossing. And I thought it was neat that Miss Odell's class has come in, and I think they went to your daycare as well. And so I think it's the early childhood class. And so just another example of the cool school business partnerships we have, and those kids getting the firsthand experience of working with young kids. And so I thought that was really neat.
I didn't know that. Great. Yeah. No, Ivan. On November 8th, I visited the high school. I had not officially visited the high school since I retired, because I was in that building for 10 years. But I thought, I was really ignoring them in that sense, but I've been up there a lot. But Mr. Spatansky took me around, and we had a nice visit, and he talked about all of the changes that he's doing. Hanging pictures on the wall. They have these big 4x4 styrofoam pictures that the art club has made, and they're styrofoam so they'd be able to hang them on the walls. They won't be heavy to cause problems. There's also some frames they have put around in various places, pictures the photography class has taken and put around. There's little maps in each learning center now that shows where who's in that learning center, with a little map of how it is, even though they're all the same, but different people in there, and that's never been in there before. We went into several classrooms and saw, again, teachers working and teaching and students learning. He also talked about the John Baylor ACT prep that we are going to be starting. They're going to have I think the discussion in December, like 9th, or the dates I might have wrong, but where they will introduce that to the juniors, since all of them have to take the ACT in April. And then that will give those juniors who want to sign up to do that. I thought that was really good. And it's a great visit. Ran into a lot of students, saw students, and then of course staff, but there aren't a lot of staff up there that were there when I was there. Most of them, some of them looked like students, but that's my age showing. But it was a great visit, and it was an official visit, which I really hadn't done since I retired from there. And I also saw the one act on Saturday, and I wish them luck in the next few weeks they have, and then their districts will be in 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks from this coming Saturday.
That's right.
In Kearney will be their district. So nothing else? Good. All right. Committee reports, November 8th, 2022, meeting the Personnel, American Civic, Curriculum, Student Services, and Communication Subcommittee. Mark.
President were Angela Blasey, myself, Skip Altick, Stuart Simpson, Kevin Mills, Brandy Busher, and Todd Rhodes. We opened up by discussing the purpose and direction statement, which Skip read to begin the meeting. I'll spare you another verbatim reading of that, but it does a very important statement in terms of pointing out what the North Platte Public School District is all about. We discussed the topic of dean of students, which we'll be discussing more at tonight's meeting. It's a position that we may be opening up here in the future at the school, depending on what's decided. Mr. Mills gave us a staffing update, talking about about recruiting staff for the future, building from within, working with an international agency, and the potential of hiring a music teacher. Dr. Rhodes updated us on a preschool study, working on perhaps maybe getting more preschool classes at Buffalo, or consolidating some things. Talked about the English language learner study. Talked about very briefly for this class. We did a little bit of the busing update. The lack of drivers is a real problem for any busing plans that we may have in the future. And we discussed renovations that are being done here at McKinley, and how some of the money came from the National Federation for Urban and Suburban Schools that we received back once that group was disbanded, and we adjourned at 9:02.
Okay. On November 10th, 2022, meeting of the Finance, Facilities, Operations, and Legislation Subcommittee. Ivan.
Thanks, Skip. Stuart Simpson, Matt Peterson, Joanne Lundgreen, myself, Todd Rhodes, Lori Coburn, Ryan Stearns, Brandy Busher, James Ayers, and Kevin Mills all attended our meeting. We as well talked about the North Platte Public School District's purpose and direction. And as was mentioned, we had the opportunity to meet at Adams, and Ryan Stearns gave us a tour of the HVAC upgrades that were finished in August. And it's always very interesting to dive into all the work that went into that. We also had the opportunity to hear from Gary Heinrich from Dana F. Cole, who is our auditors. And they had the chance to give us the report from the audit. There were no findings in the audit. Pretty impressive. If you think about it, we have about, I know the COVID relief dollars have kind of thrown it off, but I think we're somewhere around 60 million as kind of our operating budget. And so that's takes a lot of work to make sure we follow all those GAP principles. We talked about staffing and a proposal for a dean of students position. We went over the bids for the HVAC system at McDonald, and that is an action item tonight. Some safety concerns that were brought up at McKinley and those costs that were associated with that, brought up by the fire marshal. And we had a busing update, and as we've been considering making transportation and busing available, we talked a lot about the lack of drivers and trying to figure out how to deal with that situation, as we don't want to start something and not have drivers. And then we talked about the COVID relief funds, which are ESSERS is the acronym for that. There's been 3 phases. We went through how we're going to be utilizing the rest of our ESSERS $2, and then what we'll be doing with ESSERS 3. And we did go a little long with the tour. We adjourned at about 9:30.
Putting it on the tour, huh? All right, thanks, Ivan. Now is our consent agenda. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Most of the items listed under the consent agenda have gone through board subcommittee review and recommendation. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. Along with this is the approval of the financial claims and reports. And this month it was Mark and myself who went through that last Friday. And every question was answered by Janelle and Stuart. Yeah, and it was good. Yeah.
Which?
And they have an Arthur's Pizza in Scotts Bluff.
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call, Sheila.
Mark Nicholson.
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Skip Altick.
Aye.
Joanne Lungreen.
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell.
Aye.
Angela Blazy.
Aye.
That is approved. So we'll go on to our reports and discussion items. First up, Dr. Rhodes, Dean of Students, presentation.
Can we have Mrs. Busher and Mr. Mills, do you want to come up to the table and when we get to your part of the presentation? So this is something that we have discussed for several months now. The discussion started in subcommittee meetings. And then at our November subcommittee meetings, it was more of a formal presentation proposal, which we have on our agenda for this evening. Are we up, Sheila, with the, there we go. Okay, so you've heard me say before, and I believe this wholeheartedly, the most important factor for student achievement and student success is the classroom teacher that's in front of those children every single day. What we haven't talked a lot about is, in my opinion, the second most important person is the building principal as an instructional leader. And so this conversation came about primarily as we were doing a lot of visits at our elementary schools, and we were listening to our elementary principals and also Mrs. Volley at Madison as well, that in the daily events that take place in a building, there's many cases where our building principals aren't able to fulfill that level of instructional leadership, primarily due to some of the student management issues that we're seeing and some of the student behaviors that we're seeing. And I think I told both committees in my 30 years in education, not only has the amount of behaviors really increased, and we're going to show you some graphs that certainly back that up, but the severity of behaviors as well. So when we look at these behaviors, these are behaviors that occupy a great amount of time for our building leaders. And so, you know, this first slide, when we look at instructional leadership, and you'll notice some of the language in this presentation is very, very similar to our purpose and direction. And a lot of this information was taken from the DeFores and Acres as it relates to professional learning communities. Popham is in here quite a bit as well. So, you know, this is the expertise out there and the research as it relates to good instructional leadership. Principal's primary responsibility is to promote the learning success of all students, very, very similar to our purpose. Building principals can accomplish this goal by focusing on learning, encouraging collaboration, analyzing results, providing support, and aligning curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So that when we look at that first characteristic, that focus on learning, there's a lot of research around this support of teaching and how it relates to learning. So, you know, not more than probably 20 or 25 years ago, instructional leadership was really focused on the teaching aspect and not so much as on the learning aspect. So they've got to go hand in hand. And so when we really look at what schools are about, and when we look at the 4 questions that we ask ourselves, what do we want our children to know? That's that curricular piece. How do we know if they know it? That's your assessment piece. What do you do? What do we do if they haven't shown that they know that information? That's the intervention piece. That's kind of that MTSS when we look at multiple tiers of systems of supports. And then, of course, the fourth question that kind of gets left out sometimes is what do we do with the students who do know that information? And then that's really our ability to empower those students. So our instructional leaders really need to focus on the learning piece of that and kind of shift that mindset a little bit. I want to go into the next slide, Sheila, please. The second characteristic is to encourage collaboration. I mentioned MTSS earlier. Right now, our instructional facilitators facilitate most of those MTSS meetings in their elementary buildings. And then our teaching and learning coordinators, Mrs. Douglas and Mrs. Carlson, certainly participate in that as well. But this idea of collaboration takes time. It takes structures and systems and schedules in place. And so there is a little bit of management that goes in just to put all those structures into place as well. But with the end goal of being able to collaborate with teachers, getting teachers around a table. You'll notice one of the characteristics is analyzing data as well. And we do a lot of that at those MTSS meetings where we're looking at a lot of our tier 3 students and how to develop good interventions. But really that analyzing data, our instructional leaders, our building administrators need to make sure that they have their mindset on analyzing data as well. And again, that takes time to get that to put in place. You want to go to the next one, Sheila? Okay, using data to improve learning. We talked a little bit about being able to analyze a little bit. We want to be a data-driven district. We believe we are. We feel like we have a lot of different data sets out there. We have good academic data. We have common informative assessments. We have common summative assessments. We have DIBELS at the elementary level. We have MAPS data as well. So to bring all that, triangulate that data together. Again, our building principals needs to be stewards of that data as well. Now, we do a lot at the district level through teaching and learning to collect that data, and our directors do a great job of working with principals and getting it in their hands. But again, to have the time to sit down with teachers, to be able to collaborate, to really look at what that data is telling us, sometimes that can be absent based on kind of what other things we're dealing with throughout our day. And the other piece of it is to be able to provide support. And so that is through that collaborative process as well. As you know, we went with the SEED evaluation through the Nebraska Department of Ed that has our principal and teacher standards. We have talked with our principals at ADCO meetings about the use of that tool, but that tool, we look at evaluation a lot of times and really it's there for support and it's there to provide feedback. And again, the way that we provide feedback is to be in classrooms often and consistently and in a variety of different manners. So whether that's a more of an informal walkthrough, maybe it's a formal walkthrough, maybe it's a formal observation, but we need to have our eyes on that. It's really pretty similar to our district administrators getting out in buildings and seeing what's going on as well. And so you can't provide that support unless you know what's happening in those classrooms. And so that to have eyes on that firsthand knowledge to see what that support needs to look like as you move through. It might be a collaborative piece where we might be working with a mentor-mentee situation. But again, if the principal's in those classrooms to be able to see that, then they can set up, some classroom visits across for teachers as well. Aligning curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So this is an important piece. And again, this does happen at the district level with Mrs. Douglas and Mrs. Carlson. There certainly is no question about that. But to make sure that we have connections in our building, to make sure that what is being taught is the curriculum in North Platte Public Schools, to make sure that the instruction supports that content, and then to make sure that our assessments are appropriate in terms of particularly our common formative assessments. That is really important work. I will tell you in the course of my career, I would get questions occasionally on the assessment process in one classroom being different from another classroom, that the content and the grade level is the same. And so again, if we don't have our eyes, if we're not focused on the alignment piece of that, we can certainly rely on Mrs. Douglas and Mrs. Carlson for their expertise around that, but we've got to monitor that in classrooms. And we've got to be working with our instructional staff as it relates to that as well. And so, you know, these 5 characteristics really are a lot about teachers as well. But we can't have those expectations placed on teachers without our building administrators being lock, stock with our teachers as well. So again, this is more of what instructional leadership, I think a vision for instructional leadership could be in our district. We know that we do have some buildings at the elementary level that are bigger buildings in terms of our student population and have some of the more various demographics in them as well. And so that has the potential to create a little bit more student management issues that go on a day-to-day basis. The other piece I would just remind you of, when you're looking at those particular buildings, if you have a little bit more of a student population in them versus some of our other elementary, you have a greater teacher population that needs to be supported, networked, collaborated with as well. So with that, I believe we have some Swiss data that Mrs. Busher, those are the references. There we are.
Okay, so when I presented in subcommittee, we broke each school down, but this is just kind of our district. This is how many referrals per day this is an average. So if you're an administrator in an elementary, this is kind of, you're dealing with about 4 referrals a day. And those are major referrals. So that's not all referrals, that's major referrals. So that's kind of just across our district, what we're looking at in our elementaries. And when I say major referrals, those are students being removed from the classroom, and the teachers are asking administration to assist with those situations. And then looking at our major referrals, like what's our most common, physical aggression and defiance is our 2 biggest issues we're dealing with. Again, those are just majors, so there might be a minor defiance or a minor non-compliance, but these are just our majors through the district. So if you look at, those are actual numbers of how many referrals we've had for those events. And I say elementary, but I also include Madison in this data as well. So we currently have 123 students that in just the first quarter have had 3 or more referrals. So that's kind of what we're looking at number wise for students. And this is, I started collecting this data a while ago on behaviors, just kind of showing a trend of what I've noticed with student behaviors. Now, these are 5 different schools. We didn't want to label schools because we didn't want them to be stigmatized by this data, but just kind of showing an increase. One of the things Dr. Rhodes and I have said before, like we've always had behaviors in school, and we always will. But why does it feel so different now? Well, it feels different now because we're seeing it at a higher frequency. And I think really a lot of that is our tier 3 students are having behaviors pretty constantly. So it's not like, you know, maybe you'd have a student who has had a rough day and you were able to address it. Sometimes we have students that are constantly out of the classroom. And so that's kind of our increase in that's our increase in incidents. Or that might be our student data. That's our number of students. That's number of students. So in the past, in a year, you might deal with about 25 to 30 students. And now those numbers are just growing and growing. So
Maybe before we go on, can you go back to that graph, please? So those are the number of students, correct?
those are the number of students. Mm-hmm.
So those are 5 elementary buildings is where they're at. And so you can see a gradual increase in 3 of those buildings from 18-19. And all of them have significant increases from 2012, 2013.
And I would say, post-pandemic, we're just seeing kids that they don't have a lot of coping skills. So, something that might be a minor disruption in the classroom it's resulting in a major behavior. And that's kind of seems to be the trend we're seeing, especially, we've been seeing an upward trend for a while, but since the pandemic, it definitely seems like it's more severe with behaviors.
Or as candidates, obviously we have to find people to fill the positions. Who better to present that than 2 former deans of students sitting here at the table this evening? Didn't plan that, did we? We have about 20 staff members currently involved in our Next Gen Academy. Because we're into our 2nd year. Again, just a recap of Next Gen. That's collaboration with the University of Nebraska at Kearney and across the entire state. Our individuals have been selected by their principals, nominated, then placed into the program. That's where we have 3 or 4 meetings a month. The last meeting of the month is always here at the district collaboration, where we bring that group together and discuss things. So that's a great pool to have. That was one of my dreams when I landed here, is to start to create that pool, start to look at that dean of students. Obviously the other piece, from what Dr. Rhodes talked about, is to grow our own. We talked a lot about that. Skip talked about a bit earlier. So again, that piece is growing our own administrators from our own staff. And obviously we'll advertise for outside people as well. But we're looking at those teacher leaders, those individuals that are aspiring administrators. They're in the classrooms now. We meet them across the district in a lot of different roles that they're placed in. So that's why they're in that role. And I think most educators would agree that a lot of people are handpicked for some of those positions. So we're really excited about the individuals that we have. And we know that having that dean of students and that new candidate creates a little bit of a domino effect. And that worries Mr. Mills because I don't got to find staffing. So the big piece I think that I would propose, I think we all agree with it. If this does go through and the board is so kind to move forward with this, that we get it advertised and ready to go in December. With the caveat, of course, if I want Brandy Busher to be a dean of students, she's teaching English, I need to find an English teacher first. So that would lead into some other conversations, but that piece is so important, as we know we have that shortage across the entire country with that. But I'm very excited to report to the board, to the superintendent, the individuals that we have in the district that are aspiring leaders. Is very exciting to be able to put into possibly into those positions. Any questions about that?
It was asked, how would we be funding these staff members, and looking at what we want to do for the district and to support them. We looked at currently how we're paying our elementary principals, and the dean of students will be going into the buildings in support of the principal. So we're not looking at paying them at the level of an elementary principal, but support below them. So estimating it out based upon where we are with our administrators and starting base, it would be around 115,000. Now, we just got word today that we do have approval to pay for them out of ESSERS 3, but that will be a 1-year shot because ESSERS 3 concludes at the end of the 23-24 school year. But that will give us time, number one, to evaluate what they're doing, know what's going on as far as economic development in the community, and where we are as far as if our district is all of a sudden seeing growth within there, because then we can turn around and know that we're going to have more state aid, more other dollars coming in support of this process. So it gives us time to breathe, be able to evaluate it, and move forward. Questions or comments for any of us?
So I guess the other board members haven't heard the finance committee has heard me express support for this. just in the visits that I've been in the buildings, visiting with the principals for the last several months, even starting in the spring. There's several of them that have expressed a need for something similar to this. And I think it's actually something we've needed for a while. It's not the first time that I've heard this. And I think one of the great things is that as I was involved in the campaign this year, there were a lot of people who are expressing support for teachers and, we need to get more support for teachers. And this is one of those things that I think, it's support for the administrators, but it's support for teachers. And so I think that's something important to remember. And then I know Cindy O'Connor, one of the things that she commented on in her campaign was the test scores. And, and so again, as we're providing more support for the administrators and more support for teachers, then we're going to have a better learning environment for students. We're not going to have classrooms of students that are getting pulled because one of their classmates is having a temper tantrum that the teacher is having difficulty, controlling that student. So I think really in my mind, I'm looking forward to the administration bringing this to us for a vote because I think it's something that needs to happen.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback that. I agree with you 100%. When I've been in the schools, I don't know how many times the principals have been busy with students and they've had to step away from our conversations.
Right.
And this would just be fantastic for the kids.
Brandy and Kevin, I have a couple questions for you. So we talked at our subcommittee meeting, Brandy, a lot about the behaviors, and I think you said this is not a trend that's unique to North Platte. This is something that we're seeing from our colleagues across the state. But one of the things you mentioned is, and you can maybe elaborate on this, but it's not just the number of incidents, but the amount of time that it's taking our principals to deal with that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think our principals work really hard at not sending kids home. So I think one of the things that they're dealing with a student who's in crisis is it's not resolved in 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's half a day. And so a lot of our principals, if you go visit them, you'll see they'll have a student in their office. We don't have in-school suspension for elementary. And so they're taking that student all on their own. And sometimes it's a whole day. And again, like I said before, our students we're not seeing that de-escalation phase go down as quickly as it used to. It seems like they're kind of staying in that phase of being escalated. And that can take a lot of time for our principals. And they, again, nobody wants to send a kid home. They're always trying to make sure kids can stay in school. And the ultimate goal is to get them back in the classroom, but that can take a really long time. So yeah, time has become an issue.
And then another thing you talked about is, and then we talked about this a little bit, but we have counselors in many of these schools and some of them are shared, but the idea is this dean of students is going to play a different role than the counselor. Is that correct?
So we want our counselors to be a support system, not a disciplinarian. So if a counselor is disciplining a student, we've kind of defeated that purpose of them being a support system for a student. And sometimes our counselors do have to help out, but ultimately we want our counselors doing social emotional groups. We want them working with kids and developing skills. We want them doing mini lessons with kids and being that support system. So this would be someone who can obviously want them to build a relationship with a student, but also be able to be a little bit of a disciplinarian with that student as well.
And then Kevin, we talked a little bit about can you explain the vision for what we'd look at, number of dean of students and kind of how they would be allocated?
Yeah, we're looking at 3. And the allocation will be based on need of the building. We've identified at least 3 buildings we know for sure that we'd want to look at. I think we could expand it to 5, but we're also looking at some other pieces that we can use for resources in some other buildings. And I think the point, I think that's a great question, both your questions, Matt. And for those that have dealt with it We've got a couple principals here. See who's behind me. The investigation piece is so tasking. When you have to bring all those kids in and get witness statements and talk to this person, it's so tasking when you got those, until you've lived that and walked through that or been in a building and seen it, the tremendous amount of time that it takes. Even when I was at the high school and we didn't have a dean, we did evaluations and we did all the discipline. But those pieces that takes so much time to walk through that process. That's a great question.
Brandy, can you talk? So one of the things that you shared with the finance committee and probably personnel too was the Swiss data. So can you talk a little bit about how you're looking to see if you can have an impact on a student before a behavior starts?
Yeah, so our Swiss program is phenomenal. It's an amazing source of data that we can use it individually and we can use it school-wide. So we can run reports in any building to say what time of day do we have more behaviors? What location do we have more behaviors? What day of the week? Which gives us building-wide data for PBIS interventions or just supervision in general. But you can also do what's called a student dashboard. So that can show you what do we think the source of the behavior was? Was it to gain attention? Was it to avoid doing a task? And so teachers have to be very mindful when they put in a referral of why do you think this student did this? They have to put the time, the location, and a lot of details that ultimately, when we look at an individual student, we can put together really good interventions for them based on that data. And we can look and see if we have an intervention in place, if it's working, just based on how detailed that data is in that system.
Thank you. And I guess just kind of one of the things that I've had a conversation with principals about is the earlier we can catch and help students work through these behaviors, then it doesn't follow them into middle school and high school, and we're not continuing to deal with the same behaviors. So I think it's really neat that we're collecting all of that data and really working hard to help students.
No, I was just going to say thank you both for taking the time to put this presentation together. I know Dr. Rhodes and Stewart have been involved as well, but the amount of data that you guys have reviewed, and this is obviously something that you've put a lot of thought into. So I appreciate it. You've taken.
Yeah, actually our discussions in the last few months in the subcommittees, we have discussed this, and I've appreciated, especially on that data about the increase in behaviors, I think is a very significant point to be made. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, I would add, I think as we've had our discussion about this, probably the biggest concern is will we be able to staff it with the national teacher shortage that's out there statewide, nationwide? What I would add is that the group here, Todd, Stewart, and Kevin, you put together some really good information and some good strategies on what our district's doing. And so I would add that, I maybe came into this a little bit more skeptical than most, but I do think that the strategies in place are very good for finding future teachers. And I don't think that we are going to have the issues that a lot of other districts are having because of what you're doing. And I also would say with the growth in the community, I think that we're going to have to do that and have to expand upon that. So I think it was a good presentation. Part of me also said, why don't we maybe look at more frontline staff members, more paraeducators? Daughter's a paraeducator going to be a teacher, and they just aren't out there. So I think it's a pretty good innovative approach to addressing these things. I think that it is adding another layer of administration, and that's never popular. That's maybe looked at a little bit poorly. So as we as we go through this, I hope that we analyze it really well. As we look at counselors, I would kind of add really looking at that role. My understanding is their training is very similar to like an LMHP, licensed mental health professional, just not the clinical hours. So hopefully we're utilizing them in some of the de-escalation and behaviors and just making sure that we're optimizing them versus, changing someone's schedule or something like that, really utilizing them to the full extent of their scope. But I think it's one of the things with education, you can justify anything really. I'd love to pay all the teachers $1 million a year and have one teacher for every student. And you can make the case that that's the best thing for our people. And so I think that's kind of I think we need to really analyze this and say, hey, is the juice worth the squeeze for the taxpayers? But I really do commend the presentation. I think it's well thought through and a very good solution to what we're dealing with. And just really would like to say how much I appreciate the strategies in place on the staffing side, because I think that's the key to this. And as we analyze it, we're just going to have to figure out what direction we think we need to go. And like I said, whether it's worth it for the taxpayer.
I think that's a great point, Ivan. And Mr. Mills is going to give a staffing update in just a few moments here. And on a weekly basis, the cabinet talks about staffing. We're trying to be, I think, somewhat proactive on, we're trying to predict what this growth is going to look like from a student population standpoint. That can be fairly difficult when we don't know for sure from an economic development standpoint exactly what these employers are going to bring in for workers and what those families are going to look like. So Mr. Mills has done a great job kind of looking outside of the box for staffing. But I think we need to be clear that, in terms of the dean of students, if this is something that the board gives us direction to pursue, that there are no guarantees that means we're going to have 3 deans of students in place next year. Because quite honestly, we look at our Next Gen Academy. Mr. Mills is a part of that group, Mrs. Carlson and myself, and we meet with them monthly. These are great teachers. And so they're some of our very finest. And so, you take your best teachers and then potentially in high demanding content areas. And if that pool isn't out there to replace them, quite honestly, those people are going to stay in the classrooms, obviously. So there's kind of a caveat, I think, that goes along with that. But having said that, several months ago, we really had the discussion that I think in a lot of our minds, it was that this was probably 5 additional FTE, that we needed 5 deans of students to really, get a grasp on our K-5. And then, of course, our Madison Middle School 6th grade population as well. But then we started to look at projected growth and just some of the things that we already need in terms of elementary classrooms. And we have a need of teachers there. Ivan, you brought up elementary counselors and Matt did as well. And, we have a need there. We need another elementary counselor as well. So then we start to prioritize a little bit, and that it didn't take long for us to kind of come to consensus that, 5 just isn't going to happen just with the growth that we're looking at for needed staff. So that's the reason the proposal is based on 3, but we will always analyze the data. And that's something that we do as a cabinet on a weekly basis anyway. But, to come to this conclusion at this point was very much data driven. 2012, 2013, I believe I was still at the high school at that point, wasn't I?
You were.
Is that where you're at, Mr. Altig? And so I often think back to Mrs. Busher and I in our days at Adams, and Mrs. Busher was dean of students and I was the principal, and we had as many kids, if not more, in that 6, 7, 8 building. And there was a lot of juggling that went on even during that time. And that's been 15 years ago. And again, to Matt's point, it isn't just the amount of behaviors, it's the severity of those behaviors. So when you see across that K-6 landscape that each one of those buildings is potentially averaging 4 per day, those are severe behaviors. So you can imagine the amount of time that building administrator is having to work with that student, potentially parents, and regardless of what was on the calendar at 7 o'clock that morning, those things are not going to be gotten to by the time that 4:30 rolls around. So we will, Ivan, to your point, we will always be analyzing data to see where we're at with this. you know, we feel like from a financial standpoint, at least this would not have an impact year one on the general fund budget. And then we would be able to kind of assess kind of how the program's running. There's some other training that's going to go along with this. There's 2-week Boys Town training that we're looking at all our building administrators getting that training, but in particular the dean of students. So other questions or comments that you may have for me or anybody, any other cabinet members? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, staffing update, Mr. Mills.
Thank you, President Altig. Pleasure to bring to the board this evening. We had a candidate for music that we talked about in subcommittees and had a great interview, and she came down and visit today and visited with all of our music staff from 6 to 12. I was telling Dr. Rhodes I had the opportunity to meet with her parents as well. She's just graduating college here in December, so we're very excited to get that call hopefully tomorrow. I was holding you right there. You thought I had her, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Other than that, as you notice from the consent agenda, we have our first 2 retirements. You saw that on consent agenda. So obviously it begins, and looking at those openings, we have everything advertised and we'll continue to process that. I did have another individual that's going to be leaving at the end of the next year, not retiring, but resigning and moving to the eastern part of the state. So that one will be coming up as well. I had reported to you folks of the international recruiting with Teach USA as the agency. And we've conducted so far 7 interviews and we have 7 to go. The reason it takes so long, they're 14 hours ahead of us. So I can only schedule it twice a day to get them in. So we're pushing hard, and I've talked to the agency again today, and very happy to report to the board and the superintendent that these candidates are stellar. They're all from the Philippines. Predominantly 95% of them have a master's degree, and they all have over 5 years of experience teaching. And this is elementary and secondary as well. So I did 2 sections, did elementary interviews coming up next week and secondary this week. They bring a lot to the plate, and obviously it's a new process for us, for me and Dr. Rhodes, and I've talked a lot about this process. So I just want to keep the board up to date of what we're doing and how we're doing that. In those interviews, I invite principals. Obviously, it's difficult because a lot of them are 7:15 in the morning or 7:30 or 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. So either beginning of the day or the end. And they've been jumping on and providing feedback as well. So we have a good group of principals to give feedback and to see where we stand with these candidates. Other than that, we have everything ready to go for advertising and working with Carol on everything. I've created my master list here, as Dr. Rhodes said, of how it's all going to play out. There's the plan. It's all covered. Just have to implement it. So just need some candidates. Questions about staffing?
Kevin, when you explained it to the subcommittee, would you discuss the schools you have talked to who have used these international teachers, how successful they have been?
Absolutely. And I'll take one step back of talking to the agency several times. She has placed over 200 staff members in New Mexico alone. They just seem to have a great program down there. Lexington, Dr. Rhodes has talked to Lexington quite a bit, so you might want to jump in on that piece. And then I've talked to several other districts. It started a couple of years ago when I found out in Julesburg, Colorado, that they had gone through this process, and that's where I began to research it from that aspect. Then I've talked to other districts across the state and across the nation. It's obviously not only education. I think medical is probably pretty big on international recruiting as well. It's going that way with a lot of different organizations. So the only hiccups is when you start too late. And so that's why we're starting in November. The big piece is the unknown that they have to go sequential through quite a few different forms and Social Security and get all those clearances done. So those pieces, the agency will help walk through with those J1 visas in that process. But yeah, we've been reaching out quite a bit to others to see what things we can learn. I knew when last year and the year before, it was just too late to start the process. So I believe strongly right now that we're right on track of what we need to do. And then the agency will kick in and go through that. But I don't know if Dr. Rhodes or Ivan want to talk anything about international as well.
I think the one little tidbit of information that we've kind of garnered over from some other districts that we talked to, yeah, there's a 30-day window for them to get here, get their social security number, and then be employed. And so what districts have ran into is they've had these folks that have moved to the states on July 1st with an anticipated contract date of August 1st. They have to clear 2 Homeland Securities. One is with the Social Security Agency, which seems to be just a kind of a snap, and they get that. NDE for certification purposes also requires Homeland Security to do a background and pass them, and that's where we're running into issues. And so I think what we'd probably do again, Kevin's being very, very proactive right now to start that interview process. And if these are the right candidates, we'll get a contract, but most likely we would have them start July 1st as opposed to August 1st, so that would, and get them moved to the area on June 1st. We'd probably have to have them do some curriculum work during the month of July and pay them a stipend. Then they would be under contract. We wouldn't be fighting that 30-day time limit that some of the other districts are. A neighboring district here to the east ran into that. Those teachers were not certified to teach starting August 1st, and they almost had to go back to their home country. Finally, NDE was able to give them a temporary certificate. And right now, as they're waiting for Homeland Security to get back to the Department of Education, every month they're having to fill out a new application and get another temporary certificate because it's only a 30-day certificate. So it's kind of a mess. ND has explained it to me. I did visit with Clayton Waddell the other day. He said, we're going to work with you no matter what. But he kind of was pointing the finger at the federal government and Homeland Security. So his advice was talk to your senator and have them see if they can maybe move some people on the Hill. So,
Evan, is this do these applicants, if we hire them, are they limited to a number of years they can work here?
Thank you. I thought I covered that. I apologize. Yes, it's 3 years with the possibility of an extension of 2.
Okay.
So 3 years solid. And then if we like them and they like it, we could go 5 years.
Okay.
Other questions for Kevin? Thanks, Kevin. Finalize student enrollment for this year. Stuart.
Sheila's going to bring up the official enrollment that we did. And while she's doing that, well, that was quick. We pull our official enrollment on October 1, and then we have to go through various hurdles with NDE. And then the official one is posted on October 31st. Now, I look at it from a global standpoint because that's what drives state aid. And so I'm always concerned about where we are total wise. Mr. Mills looks at it from individual school-wide school building or individual classroom, because as he was just talking about on staffing, trying to identify, do we need a staff member in this classroom or this classroom, let alone the 6th, 7th and high school, so that he can make sure that we have the staffing accordingly. So with that, and we'll just step down. Sheila has page 2 right up here. You can see our various schools for the 22-23 school year. It was asked in my committee, and Jefferson and Lincoln at this point in time for the official numbers are at the same capacity of 259 students, and those are our 2 largest buildings. Thinking about it, years ago when Dr. Rhodes and I first started, Jefferson was almost 100 students larger at that point in time. But obviously, we've seen dynamics moving in the district, and we're hoping for different changes moving forward as far as our district's concerned. But we had 3,528 certified students in the district as of October 1. Now, on my financial report, we always see the change in enrollment from the official one to the current month that we look at. So it just sort of reminds us that we're first here for students. And then from there, we focus on the funding portion. But I'd also like to point out too, on the bottom, our preschools. We have a full day at Buffalo, all the classrooms. And those are 18 students each. At Jefferson, typo, it is a full day. Osgood's a half day and Washington's a full day. But that was just this year for Jefferson. The previous 2 years were half days. If Sheila can go down to page 5, you have a lot of data in there that you can look, and really what I want to focus on here is you can see the various grade levels at each of our buildings. But if you look down below, we have the highlighted total by grade and then the prior year. So for example, on first grade, last year they were kindergartners and we had the official enrollment of 247 students in kindergarten. This year they're first graders. So you can see that change and the percentage put out there. So we watch not only number one, the total amount, individual grades, but then we look at grade level and try to figure out, what are our students doing? Why are they changing, or why have we lost students? So for example, we lost, I don't want to say 9 students at first grade from kindergarten to first. So, we're always focusing on where it is. The other piece that I want to say is that as you start looking across grade level, we used to be at 300 when you were teaching Mr. Alteg. And now all of a sudden we're going down to about a 250 grade level. So we continually look at grade level, how many students are in there. And then obviously still we have 7 buildings that we operate at the elementary level, and we're going to always continue to watch and make sure that we're staffed accordingly. If you go down to page 8, then I always love this one because it really does show the district. Number one, hard proportionate between male and female. And then second of all, the diversity that we have in the district. And you can see as we shift in diversity for the 22-23 school year, where we're moving toward, and depending upon Caucasian I've always liked the 2 or more races. Obviously, that's because of my daughter, but still in the process, you can see how we're changing in demographics across the district. And I've always liked that. And then finally, page 11, that's the big one. We always talk about option in, option out students. And so you can see for 22-23 are opt-out students and the various district that picks up those kids, or they've opted out to those various school buildings. I included the 21-22 school year so you can compare those to the previous. But then over on to the right, you can see our historical trend of option out and option in students. Roughly, we're maintaining around, and I'm going to round as an accountant does, about 500 net option students that are going out of the district. Questions about our option enrollment? I'm already looking at state aid from this enrollment numbers, but obviously that's preliminary stuff, and we will, if we have opportunity at the finance committee now or later, but I know at the end of January, we'll have a lot more data coming in so that we can deal with where state aid will be in the future.
Stuart, I know that you monitor this throughout the year too. Is that correct? We don't just look at our official October and then wait till the end of the year. And I see Mrs. Flanders in the back of the room. I believe she had some new students start. I think we met there and then shortly after that. So I think it's important to note this is always changing as well. And by the end of the year, we'll see a different number likely, and hopefully it'll be an increase.
That is a good point, Matt, because what the state does is takes our official enrollment and then monitors throughout the year. And at the end of the year, we upload our average daily membership. So Matt Peterson may have attended every day, but Mark Nicholson may have stayed here till the end of October and then moved to a different school district. So we see those fluctuations in our enrollment. And then from there, what the state does will take our official average daily membership from our enrollment and then rerun state aid based upon actual numbers of student data, which then will reflect in positive or negative adjustment in our state aid for each year. So like you said, yes, as we see economic development, as we see people moving in, even if we have this number here for our official enrollment, if we see, as Mrs. Flanders showed, we had 5 new students. If we can get those numbers coming up, then that's going to really readjust our state aid coming next year at this point in time.
Have you gotten numbers from the high school yet about mid-year graduates, about how many we're going to have?
I have not received it, but I can reach out to. Go ahead.
I know Mr. Spatansky and his team are working on those applications. The spreadsheet has been shared with me. So when we get to that point, we will share that in subcommittees to see what those numbers look like. Gosh, COVID really threw kind of a wrench into that with some of our online learning and some of our students' abilities and skill set to kind of work ahead and work at a little bit faster pace than if they had been in person. So I wouldn't want to say a number at this point because I know there's still some outstanding applications out there right now that have not been approved yet. So
Okay.
I think they're probably through the approval process of about half of who has applied. And then they have a group that didn't meet the qualifications. So they have them kind of on the outside looking in. So I think we'll probably be able to share that at December subcommittee meetings.
Okay.
Other questions for Stuart? All right, monthly financial and budget report, Stuart.
I'm going to touch on a couple of pages. First one would be page 6, Sheila. About a couple of years ago, we went and consolidated our bank accounts. Number one, it keeps a better handle on my cash flow as we move forward. So we're not dealing with, as property taxes coming in, we can handle that cash flow for payroll and everything else. What I really just want to show is number one, we have about 8.6 million in Nebraska land. And then on a couple of other entities, total amount of cash on hand is 8.7 million that we oversee. At this point in time, that number will decrease as property taxes flow in lower, especially in January, February, and March, and then pop back up there in April and May. So just really quickly on that one, if you want to go to page 8, this is my standard flow. And I want to say on this one, and we'll talk more when I want to show you the building fund, but when you look at our grants, and I know we have a myriad of grants that we're continually monitoring and putting in requests for and getting the payment back. But NDE has really stepped up on reimbursement. For example, today I just received notice that we're getting about 400,000 coming back in for ESSERS 2 for construction at Adams. And I just put that in at the end of October after we made all the payments for some of our contractors in September and October. So I'm really pleased to see that turnaround time at NDE, which keeps, as you can see, our monthly cash flow somewhat at the same level it's been the last 4 years, but hopefully maybe, if anything, a little bit of a bump as we move down into the lower months accordingly. Next page would be 9. So as we talk about reliance on property taxes compared to state aid, and we've done sort of looked at the trends over, a 12-month period. But right now, I just wanted to show, as you can see on this chart, we're reliance more on state aid to support our budget and reserves in comparison to property taxes. So we're going to watch that over the course of the year and how that graph shifts according to property taxes coming in and state aid. And then finally, page 13. I all of a sudden I had a brilliant idea, and I'm just like changing stuff on this, and so this report just makes me happy. But what it's really doing is showing you two pieces of information. Number one, besides what we have cash and bank in our building fund, but it shows with me without having to create a spreadsheet, I can run this report off the system and get it taken care of. But it shows how much money we're going to be receiving in Esser's dollars for the construction of our building fund for Adams, and then focusing on McDonald. So you can see that number. And if you look at the expenditures for Esser's, halfway down, it'll say 91 expenditures and 434,000. We got that money in today. So I'm really pleased to see that, and it ties back and it's good. And then the second half is the construction that is supported by property taxes. And you can see the property taxes coming in as well as the expenditures going out. And a lot of the expenditures right now are the skylight, and we'll be getting money back in from insurance as they evaluate all our claims. So a little bit of excitement there for me.
And the bond for the lake school will be paid next December.
Bond fund will be paid this next month. I got all the reports from our bond council, so we'll be paying that off and turning and as well as, if you wanted to, you could look at the QC Puff. We have $1 million sitting in there. We're going to be paying out a chunk for all the bonds. And I say a chunk, that's a good accounting term, but I'll have the total amount of bonds that we're paying here in December for our QC Puff. But we have enough in reserves to cover that, and then we'll be starting to levy for the next payment accordingly.
Any questions? Okay. Stuart, Legislative Committee update.
From my standpoint, it's just going to be interesting to watch now the legislature as we have all the dust settles and what's going to be happening here going forward. And Dr. Rhodes was at ESU meeting and really listening to what will be happening, especially for the education chair and the revenue chair and the Speaker of the House, and how those three positions are going to play out for us for next year. And then all the myriad of property tax reductions or state aid modifications. And that's one of them that I'll be attending. Wednesday morning, we have my business officials meeting beginning at 9, and we go till about 1. And then obviously a lot of us break off to go to select sessions in that afternoon. But in the morning, one of the items is to discuss a proposal by the board president of Milford Public Schools. And in that, possibly once again, trying to realign it with foundation aid or something else that will support school districts across the state. So we're going to listen to him, which then will correlate to what the education chair will be like and what can happen over the course of the next. And this is a long session, which will be 90 days also.
Right.
So.
And my legislative committee will meet Wednesday at 11. And we will get a lot of information then, which we go for 2 hours, but it's basically just, they will be thinking about what probably will happen. And then we'll meet until that first pre-session that starts at 1. So,
and I'm glad you brought that up too, Skip. GNSA will be meeting Thursday afternoon, right after all the sessions.
Thursday. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
As
Mr. Simpson said, at our ESU 16 ADCO last week, Senator Walls, zoomed in. And I think, as you know, Senator Walls has been the education chair, for the last 2 years. And, Lynn is a champion of public schools and, is very thoughtful. She's a former teacher, by trade. And she has submitted her letter to the other 48 senators for education chair. Senator Newman is the other one that has officially put his name in for education chair. Those were the two that came up. Senator Walls, I think, was probably about as skeptical as I've heard or seen her in the years that I've been able to visit with her and work with her. So I think we've talked about this before. Just because you were a former chair, and you put in to be the chair, if you don't get it, most likely you will not be on the committee. And so if Senator Moon ends up chairing that education committee, we probably lose Lynn Walls on that committee, which is a real shame. She seemed to think that we'd probably see something with student discipline again come across the floor. Obviously, property tax relief will be an ongoing topic on the floor as well. And in terms of school funding, she kind of thought maybe Governor Pillen's 3450 might have a little bit of momentum on the floor. So we'll kind of see. I can't imagine that our urban senators would let that happen, because you'd see a shift in state aid funds moving from those urban schools out to rural schools. So we'll monitor that. I think most of you know I've been heavily involved in NUCS over the course of years on their legislative committee, and I still receive a little bit of information. I would just say this: Dave Welsh is somebody that Mr. Simpson mentioned a little bit ago. He's the Milford school board president. And he's a large landowner, and Dave's been heavily involved in the Columbus plan. If you remember the Columbus plan that came out last year, and he kind of has his own plan that takes some of those characteristics from the Columbus plan. So I think it'd be interesting to see what he has to say with the NASBO group. He's a sharp individual, and obviously pays a lot of property taxes as a property tax owner. So it'll be interesting. I think we're still waiting on a couple of those contested senatorial races at the state level. But it looks like the floor may lose their ability to filibuster, which potentially could be damaging to any legislation that wouldn't be positive for public schools. Vouchers, for instance, for private schools, some of those different types of things. If they can't filibuster to kind of get that question to stop, it's probably going to go to a vote. So I know Lynn she was kind of pessimistic about that, but I think in another week we'll know for sure where those races are at. So
right. Hey, any other questions? Okay, superintendent's evaluation. For those listening and watching, state statute requires that a new superintendent must be evaluated both first half of the year and the second half of the year. Dr. Rhodes came on in July. We used the Nebraska Association of State School Boards for our tool to evaluate Dr. Rhodes. Those were filled out, I believe, in first part of October. And he did a self-evaluation. All 6 of us sent in an evaluation. Those were put together by NASB, and then those results were sent to me, and then all of you received those, the comments, the grading, and that type of thing. We have to discuss this tonight, and then it is also an action item because we have to vote to accept the evaluation. And there are a couple things we have to do at the end, and then that is decide which 3 areas we see as the goals and a timeline for that. And actually that will be a little easier than I thought it might be, because the first and second goals are the same between the board and Dr. Rhodes is the third one. So we'll discuss that and decide which one of those we want to do. Once that is done and we vote on that, and then Dr. Rhodes and I in the next couple of days will sign that. And then that will be sent in to NDE and also to the Association of School Boards. We did not just have time to discuss it last month because we got it like 3 days before. I got all the results like 3 days before the meeting. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's lengthy, pages and pages and pages that we had to fill out, plus all the comments. I didn't feel at that time that it was for people who have jobs could go through all that in those 3 days. I could, but I don't, I'm retired. So we put it off till this month. So keeping in mind that, we'll go ahead and discuss what our opinions are and so forth. By the way, it was very positive on both sides. I can tell you that. And secondly, the board graded Dr. Rhodes higher than he graded himself on a lot of things. He was hard on himself, but you know, he really took over July 1st. And you know, we're only in 4 months into this. And then this will be done again in the spring. And you'll get involved with that one, Cindy. So go ahead and start making comments. I said enough, and then I'll come in later on.
Well, I think one thing to note is we switched to the NASB evaluation tool this first time for Dr. Rhodes. And Ivan had mentioned this in the past, and I think it was really beneficial. I think it's a better tool than we've used in the past, and it gave us more of an opportunity to look at all the different categories and provide feedback and things like that. You know, statutorily, we're required to do this. It's hard when someone's only been in the job for 3 or 4 months to really give an in-depth evaluation. But, you know, the thing I noticed is there was a lot of common themes throughout the evaluation from the board members. I think we're all seeing a lot of the same positives with Dr. Rhodes. I think the thing that stood out to me the most is that the board's highest standard was the organizational and cultural leadership. And I think to me, that's one of the most important things for our superintendent to provide is the culture. You know, I think really starts with the superintendent at the top. And so the thing I noted is, you know, in the few months he's been here, Dr. Rhodes has been out in the buildings. He's been present. I think he actually had to pump the brakes to start because I don't think he wanted to scare the administrators and teachers getting out there right away. But after kind of a break-in period, he's been out and present in you know, the buildings and with the students and the teachers, and I think that's definitely a huge positive because that's where we're going to see a lot of what you know, where he's going to see a lot of what the district maybe needs to do differently or perhaps continue doing. And so I've been really encouraged by that and just would encourage you, Dr. Rhodes, to keep doing that. I think it's important to be a presence not only within the district, but also within the community. And I know you're starting to slowly start to do that with more civic organizations and things like that. So I've been very pleased with the performance so far and look forward to continuing the year.
Go around or just jump in?
Jump in.
I think it's clear that we hired the right person, and I think that's very pleased with where we're at with the transition. And I think that really after 3 months, as Matt said, you can't really give a whole lot of feedback other than what's the culture, what's the vibe, and it's completely positive from my perspective. And so I'm very happy with the decision that the board has made, and look forward to those board members that get to work with Dr. Rhodes in the future.
So one of the things I would say is it'll be interesting to see, I guess, what our evaluation is in the spring. I don't know that it's going to change a whole lot other than it will be maybe more positive just because in the time that has passed since we've been able to fill out the evaluation, there's been several more positives that I've seen.
Yeah,
and
it's been a month. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I really appreciate, I've gotten to see Dr. Rhodes utilizing data and doing some of the other things that maybe when I filled out the evaluation the first time, I either had to say, well, I'm not really sure because we haven't seen this from him yet, or you know, or anyway, so also when I went to visit with one of the principals, it was after I had filled out the evaluation and the things that this individual shared with me, the principals being able to get out into the buildings, to the other buildings with their meetings, and just some of the other things that were shared with me led me to believe. And I asked this individual, I said, so you feel supported? And they said, yes, I do. And so again, just like Matt said, a lot of positivity coming from people within the district, and I really appreciate that. So
I was gonna talk about the positivity of the culture too. So like, there's that, and yeah, the teachers and admins that I've talked to have felt so much more supported. It's been great.
I will add just on that, I appreciate one of the things that I visited with the principal about, as far as being able to visit the other buildings. That's something that I've appreciated as a board member, when we've gotten to go to other school districts, or, you know, just getting out in the district. You definitely can get a feel for the culture of the building, and just it's so much better to see these neat, innovative things in action than just to hear about them. And so the principal that I visited with said that it's good for them, just in that they're able to get new ideas. You know, maybe there's things that they've heard about, but then to actually see it, and then they can take it and kind of make it their own. So things like that I think are really great. And the professional development days, it's great to see all of the teachers together and having some of that collaborative time. And I think that they're able to learn and grow from each other just in having that time together.
The other thing I forgot to mention is sorry, Mark. The two areas of growth, I think it's important to note. I mean, first of all, they're not low scores to start, but they're educational leadership and mission, vision, and goals. Those are, I think, the two hardest areas for us to really judge at this point, just because those are hard things to show in a 3 to 4 month period. So I think when we move forward, I mean, I imagine those are going to be at least two of our areas of growth. And so I think it's important to remember that, like Joanne said, we might, between now and when we complete this in the spring, that's something that could completely change. So I'm happy that none of our areas of growth are really something that need a lot of growth. So
Yeah, and the scores were really good. I mean, those are the lowest scores, but they were high scores. I've always, evaluations like that, they always have to have something that they show needed some improvement. Well, if you're down at like 1.6, you know, that's really improvement. But when you're up there like 4.98, I mean, how much improvement can that be? Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to echo what's been said so far, that the assessment was quite good. And I think we have a lot of confidence in the hiring at this point. And naturally, there was a lot of, we're not sure yet at this point, but I think as we go along, we'll know a lot more.
You know, I agree. And I think going back to the culture thing, a lot of positivity, administrators, teachers, so forth. I really like that he's out in the schools quite a bit. And I've had that mentioned to me, that teachers see him quite a bit. And that's a really very positive sign. And I'll reiterate your comment, Ivan. We did hire the right person.
Sure did.
And if you remember right, it was all this time last year when we were really getting involved in trying to narrow it down and so forth. And we don't want to go through that again for a while. I don't.
Just to add, I think it's neat that he not only interacts with the teachers and staff, but it's the students as well.
Right.
I had someone at the college share with me today that Dr. Rhodes was actually out there for a project search presentation. And it was with this college employee's student. And she said that she didn't want to tell the student who Dr. Rhodes was initially, because she didn't want the student to get nervous. And so after the presentation, Dr. Rhodes went up and visited with this student, and later the student mentioned to the college employee, you know, what a nice man he was. And they thought it was great that he took interest in them and their presentation, and they asked who he was. And so then at that point, they told him that it was the superintendent, and the student did kind of, oh, I'm glad I didn't know that before. So anyway, but yeah, it's good that he's out there and interacting, all ages. He's interacting with the kids and finding out what they're learning and what they're interested in. And it's good to have that interaction.
Okay. I would say that's pretty positive. So yes, and we will be voting on this. We'll probably have to decide on that third thing when we vote, which one of those we will use, and timeline. We will discuss that too in our, I think that's pretty easy, but we'll do that when we vote. All right. Any other comments or in the discussion part? All right. Public comment. Public of questions and comments may take place at this time in the agenda. Individuals who want to address the board must complete a guideline for public comments form with the date, topic, addressing, name, address, and the name of any organization you represent, and give it to the board clerk prior to the meeting. When called upon by the presiding officer, the individual shall proceed to the table and state his or her name and address. An individual may not exceed 5 minutes, and total time for all individuals who want to speak shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority vote of the board approves extended allocated time. This time for public comment shall not be used to address specific individual student discipline or employee performance issues. Complaint and grievance processes are in place to deal with the issues of this nature. Sheila.
Yes, I have one. Jennifer Thomas.
There we go. Thanks. Good evening. And before I get to my name's Jennifer Thomas, North Platte. Before I get to my concern, I would just like to echo what the board said about seeing Dr. Rhodes out in the schools. My daughter had the honor of being one of the student ambassadors at Eisenhower. So she got to give you and Tina a tour, and she was a little nervous because she knew beforehand that you were coming, but yeah, it was pretty cool. And just a shout out to my daughter's teacher, Mrs. Leach at Eisenhower. She's just phenomenal. Mr. LaChapelle, he's doing a great job. He told Layla that she was supposed to tell you that he's a great principal, but she must have forgotten to do that. Okay, so now to what I came here for was to discuss a video that was recently shown to all of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders during library time at Eisenhower. As I mentioned, my daughter is a 5th grader, and when she came home, she had pulled up a link to the video to show it to me. It was a preview of a book that was a Golden Sower Award nominee, and it started out as a touching story of parents assuring their child that despite changes in their family, their love for the child does not change. But then we find out that dad is gay and leaving his family to marry his boyfriend. And everything about this is great, except for those people who may not be accepting and kind. This wasn't just a book on a shelf. This was a video shown to a captive audience who couldn't choose to avoid it. I did some research on this book and found out that it was not originally included on the list of nominees. Some questioned why the book wasn't on the list, and the committee chair said the Golden Sower Award is for all of the schools in Nebraska, public and parochial. We've always respected the idea that we do not want to put titles that would be something that our parochial schools could not support. We also do not put on things like Christmas stories because public schools can't use them. And our goal is not to place our teachers and librarians in an uncomfortable position at their schools and with their students and families. Although not originally included for valid reason, those who are hell-bent on making sure that our kids are subjected to this material kind of threw a tantrum, and instead of the traditional list of 10, they made it 11. I think Nebraskans spoke loud and clear when the NDE attempted to push similar ideology as part of the health standards and overwhelmingly rejected it.
So the questions that it makes me ask is who's ultimately responsible for deciding to show this? And do you think it's okay? Is this what I should expect going forward? It would seem, like you would be aware that this would be contrary to the values of most families in the district. Is this going to continue to be shown at other elementary schools? Do you think parents of the children who already saw it should be made aware of it? I did complete the form that I was given to ask for the title to be removed. I never expected or wanted to have to do that. Didn't think I would have to. So maybe some self-auditing is necessary, asking if the material is really beneficial to the educational goals for our children. And it's not about me going out and seeking books to ban. There's a difference, I think, between censorship and discernment. And I think it's expected that not all books are appropriate for all ages and all places. And I understand not everyone shares my views, and that's okay, but I would hope that you would respect that as our children's parents, it's our exclusive right to instill our values about faith, family, sexual morality, and not to abdicate that responsibility to the government. I recently wrote a letter to the editor saying that I support public education, our great teachers, my kids love school, and how incredibly happy I have been with the quality public education that they are receiving. This has definitely shaken my trust and made me question whether or not I can personally feel comfortable sending my child to a place where our family values not only are not respected, but actively countered. I would definitely like to continue to support public education. So I would ask, can you assure me in the future that topics like this will be left to the parents? I would hope that you would not allow or invite this type of material and thus distract from all of the great things that are happening at North Platte Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, we'll move on to our action items. Request approval of McDonald Elementary HVAC system bid.
Part of ESSER's 3 program is to upgrade our HVAC systems in schools if we have that opportunity. And we had took a tour of McDonald Elementary back in October and really showed what some of the reasons why we want to focus on upgrading that school first. In that, finding out and reaching out to entities that build HVAC systems, they are extremely far out as far as receiving those products. So that is why we have this bid in front of us now. As you can see on 2 of them, they range from 24 weeks to almost 32 weeks of getting them built and back out to North Platte Public Schools. One is between 15 and 17 weeks, but it's obviously a lot more dollars than what we're looking at. So with that, looking at the bids, taking into account the number of weeks that we need to, we're looking at we would like to go with mechanical sales of $300,279 paid from ESSER 3 program, get those contracts out, get them started to build so that we can get them hopefully in by somewhere around the 1st of June so that we can attack McDonald Elementary in the quickest amount of time possible. Questions? This will be a Daikin unit similar to what we installed at Lincoln Elementary. I know we've done training at Adams, but we were in the process of doing training. So we completed it at Adams, but Daikin has been working extremely well at Lincoln. We feel that this will be a comparable unit to put in at McDonald Elementary.
So Stuart, if my math is correct, we're looking at basically July, probably when the units would get here. Is that?
Yeah, if you're counting up 30 to 32 weeks, yes,
Okay.
at this point in time. And so we'll be keeping on top of them to find out, the status of where they are so that we can make sure the timeline, because we don't want to get in and start removing everything and then all of a sudden they're pushed out to the 1st of September. So we're going to make sure before the end of the school year, we still have that timeline met, because then we can work with a contractor to get them installed and ready to go for the start of school in August. So very, very tight timeline, but really wanting to get them taken care of so we can get them out and get them installed.
And we can look at doing, if we know they'll be here in time for this upcoming school year, we can do a lot of the prep work throughout the summer and then just bring these in kind of at the tail end, or is this something that we can't really?
It can, because we can do a lot of other prep work. Number one, we're going to have to remove all the ceilings in McDonald so that we can get enough ceiling height in there, put in some new dropped-in ceiling as well as new LED lights. If we remember when we walked through McDonald, we had the old style of long tube lights up there. We want to come back in and do what we did to at Adams, where we want to put in these LED lights, new dropped in ceiling. So we have the opportunity going in and doing some other prep work for that before we even get these units in. The other piece that we're going to be upgrading to is windows as well as vestibules. Number one, we want to create a air quality in there. And as Kim, Mrs. Flanders knows, we have a lot of frost buildup on a lot of those. So if we can create those vestibules, create better window glass pane, we can then control that energy. So we got a lot of other items that we're going to do around this envelope of the building of McDonald Elementary before those units come in. Those units will be the last piece. If anything, drop it in. I'm gonna simplify it, but it's basically cut a hole in, drop it in, and then seal it back up. And then after that, put a new roof on. Because the roof should have been replaced this year, but we're pushing it off until we can get everything taken care of at McDonald at this point in time.
Why do you suggest them, even though it's just $3,000 difference, but the bottom bid is for less time and less money?
We've been in conversations with our architect firm and our contractors, and this company or this type of product has been installed in a couple of school districts, and they have not had positive outcomes. And so with mechanical sales and a Daikin unit, we've had a positive outcome at Lincoln. So we're going to go with something that works well here in North Platte. The other piece is that we have entities within North Platte or close to us that will service the product. So we're also looking at service too.
Right. Okay.
Good question.
Is the Aeon more of an off-brand? Is that kind of what
It's more of an off-brand, and the superintendents that have put them in their buildings have basically said, that, okay, I'm going to live with it, but I don't want it around anymore because it hasn't worked out well and they haven't been able to get the service that they need. And I think that's a big piece. When we look at what we did at Adams, what we've done at Lincoln Elementary, we have contractors. I think you even made a statement when we were doing Adams, Ivan, is we have a company that's located out of Kearney and Hastings that will come out here to service those products that if we get something else, it could be Lincoln or Omaha. And with Train, we even know that we struggle sometimes to get them out here from Lincoln, Omaha, but we can use that company in Kearney to come and service the Train. But it is one of the products we've had in the district, and it's been well.
I would move to approve the bid of mechanical sales for the HVAC project at McDonald.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion?
I would just say briefly from the tour we got from Ms. Flanders, which was very nice. And then a month later being in Adams, where we've done the new project with the new lighting and everything. I mean, this is something that definitely needs to be done. You walk into those new rooms at Adams and it's a very comfortable learning environment. And so I'm definitely in support of moving forward with this.
Anyone else? Roll call, Sheila.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Skip Altick.
Aye.
Joanne Lundgreen.
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell.
Aye.
Angela Blazy.
Aye.
Mark Nicholson.
All right. Approval of the 2021-22 audit. Stuart.
Now we have them digital for you so that if you'd like to take it home and read it, I'm welcome.
How many pages?
Yeah.
It's probably around 70. There we go. I didn't say 75.
Matt read it all?
We give him a bad time, but he's very, very positive on the finance committee. So I do appreciate that. But I want to touch on a couple of things. As Dr. Rhodes went through Dean of Students and the focus on learning, we can correlate that back to what we do in the audit because we're continually learning all the time on what our requirements are for, what we're supposed to be doing and how we're communicating that, number one, to you as a Board of Education, but also to the State Department, because we have to ensure that we have the budget codes correctly and that we're reporting by building because, you know, when we're dealing with all of our buildings, you know, it's not just one budget code, it's multiple budget codes because we have to report by what their requirements are. So learning always takes place in the business office. Two, collaboration. One of the items that they always put on our notes from the auditors is cross-training, and we're continually working at cross-training between all of our staff so that we can make sure that we can look at the data, analyze it, and then make sure that we're getting it out correctly to everybody accordingly. And then finally, NSCAS, we talk about that at our student level. Well, this is our NSCAS for the business office, because if we don't get a good report, then all of a sudden we have to then be accountable to you on why it isn't. And so that's what I'm doing. And Matt asked a good question before the board meeting tonight. Do auditors and accountants butt heads? But, you know, we do and we don't, because we work together to make sure that we as the business office are doing the best job possible so that when they come in and look at it, they know what we're doing and how we've done it. And then we've followed the procedures and the requirements and guidelines, as Ivan said, on a GAAP basis. And we look at GASB all the time, which is a Government Accounting Standards Board, to make sure that we're doing what is needed to report it to the state and everywhere else. So with that, in closing, I want to say thank you to Cindy O'Connor, Janelle Euling, and Travis Otterkirk. The four of us working to operate a $60 million budget, and which fund it comes out of, what it's required to do, reporting on our grants. I can't say enough about it. We can't do it in isolation. I can't do it in isolation. We have to do it as a group working together. And then, everybody else like Sheila and Carol and everybody take up the slack when we're pulled away with our auditors. So thank you.
I would move to approve the 2021-2022 audit.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any more discussion?
I think it is important to note that this is, I think, my sixth audit I've experienced. But every year the auditors comment on how well Stuart and his business office work with the auditors and provide all the information they need. And so I get the impression from those comments that that's not always the case everywhere. And so I think it's good to know that our district financial office is cooperating well with the auditors and providing them everything they need.
Yeah, when I have come up here when they are here, and then I go into the room they're in and they have these boxes and stacks of things all over the place. And I'm so happy they're doing that, not me, but that's not my forte, but they're very, what you have to do is very extensive. And we know that from when we do monthly audits. And so, yeah, to always get good marks from them, I think is great. Roll call, Sheila.
Skip Baltic.
Aye.
Joanne Green.
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell.
Aye.
Angela Blazy.
Aye.
Mark Nicholson.
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
It is passed. Now, approve a superintendent's evaluation. We will be doing that, but we need to decide what. We have the first two because they match, but we will have to make a decision which of the others, either our third point or his third of improvement, we should select or select another one. Just keep that in mind that we need to do that, and a timeline. My suggestion of the timeline would be for the next audit, which would happen probably in April, discussed in May.
Evaluation.
Sorry.
It's kind of an audit.
Yeah. My timeline for the evaluation, I would think we would do it in April and then discuss it in May. That gives, not even a year though. I always think you about need a year to really evaluate that, but that would be my suggestion. Now, on the other part of which would be our third point, I'll leave that up to us to discuss it and so forth. So. Go ahead.
Well, I guess my opinion would be, since this is the board's evaluation of Dr. Rhodes, it would make sense for our third lowest category to be the one we look at for our third area of improvement,
Which is community relations.
Again, I think that's an area that, similar to the other two, is just something that's going to take some time to develop. But so that would be my
You've lived
recommendation
here
if we go
again
with
since
that.
June or July. Yeah, June. Yeah.
Well, and I think too that areas of growth, I think Dr. Rhodes is really focused on his district, which he should be. And I think from our perspective, we see good organizational and cultural leadership. And as Matt said, we're looking at community relations. It's something that it's been great since you've been here, but that's something that you'll have to develop into. And when you talk about managing a $65 million budget, and you kind of are a politician in town, and so that's I think that's why we put that. But I also actually really like that you were focused on organizational and cultural leadership. But I guess we think you're doing pretty good in that. So
yeah,
I would agree with Matt.
I agree with you on that. By the way, Ivan, I really do. I was surprised to see it when I saw that. But the community relations, when he's only been back in the community for, 4 months, 5 months, it's hard to do that. It's hard to do it in 4 or 5 years sometimes. So.
So my comment on it would just be, it seems like there was, I was trying to scan through the executive summary to see if I could find it again, but I believe Dr. Rhodes at one point in the evaluation had commented on continuing to build the internships and some of the extra opportunities for our students. And so I, again, think that falls really well with the community relations piece. Although I am going to say, as I was thinking about it this afternoon, I really think the culture of our school district and the community relations pieces do go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And so, but I'm going to be inclined to agree with everybody else that, not that we don't think that the other part is important. We're going to definitely keep an eye on that as well. But just an area for growth for now would be the community relations piece.
I would move to approve the evaluation as presented with standard 4, educational leadership, standard 1, mission, vision, and goals, and standard 6, community relations as the areas of growth identified by the board.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded, and with the timeline of April.
Yes.
I will add that to that. Okay.
Perfect.
Any more discussion? A roll call, Sheila.
Joanne Lynn,
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell,
Aye.
Angela Blazy,
Aye.
Mark Nicholson, Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Skip Alter.
Hi, that is passed. Dr. Rhodes and I then will get that filled out, signed. Probably not this week. Probably not, but I will talk to Katie Coble at NASB. I will send it that we did this tomorrow. I'll send her an email and then we will get that done and go on from there. All right, future board calendar. The state education conference is this week, Wednesday through Friday. Then the Nebraska Children's Health and Education Summit will be at Boys Town on November 30th. Then we have the new board membership workshop here in North Platte on December 6th, which both of our new members will be attending, and also Joanne, Dr. Rhodes, and myself will be there. And then the President's Retreat will be February 5th and 6th in Ogallala. And that's not only open to presidents, it's also open to any board member that wishes to attend. Okay?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I didn't even get that out. Very good, Angela.
Tip of your tongue.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to adjourn. Roll call, Sheila.
Ivan Mitchell,
Aye.
Angela Blazy.
Aye.
Mark Nicholson, Matthew Peterson, Skip Altick.
Aye.
Joanne Green. Aye.
We